Planning a trip is not that easy, especially if it's the first time you're planning a long one. There are locations, camps, permits, food, interstate border crossings that take your fruits, veg and more. Then the big questions, which tools and spares to bring, fuel stops, fuel range, and of course, budgets. I'm going to simplify the process of planning a trip regardless if it's on-road or off-road. Planning a big trip is meant to be fun and exciting, so let's make it exactly that. Before we get to the all-important points, we need to choose a destination, a journey. But you've likely already done that. But you also need to do that quick Google search so you can find out the best time of the year to visit. Do you need to book a year in advance? Some places you do. And season closures. The Simpson Desert is closed in summer. The Cannocksock route is closed in summer. Other locations are closed in winter. Woo! Look at all that information we're covering to help you make it less stressful. While you're comprehending how much stuff there is, hit that subscribe button and help me out to help you out. You know what I mean? It's free. Step 1, planning your stopovers and the days on the highway, even before you get to your destination. There won't be too many, but there are many different variations that you could do. You could choose a caravan park, like most people like to do, because they like to be around other people, showers, etc. But you can get the same result at a station stay, and it's going to be much better. It's going to feel like you're in the bush. It's going to feel like you're on a trip and not in a caravan park with old mate next to you, listening to Margaret farting to your left and Barry burping and snoring to your right. It's not that pleasant. You're better off being at a station stay. That's what I would choose anyway. In fact, station stays have a lot to offer. Tracks, great campsites, spread out campsites, by a river perhaps, and campfires, because there's not camping without a campfire. And also you get to chat to the owner, should he be around. A much more Aussie, outback experience rather than, was that Barry or Margaret? One of them's fun. The other type of rest stops you can do on your way to your journey are of course the rest areas on the way. Now the reason why I'm bringing this up, because everyone knows about rest areas. You've got 24-hour rest areas, but you also got all the other rest areas that are dotted all over this map. Many people think you can't stay there, you can't camp there. Well, technically speaking, you can't camp there, but you can most definitely rest there. It's a matter of road safety. If you can't drive any further, you pull over and you rest. If you're resting for 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, heck, 10 hours, no one can tell you otherwise. You're resting. And when you get further away from civilization, there are far and few in between. So you could even stretch it a little bit further by choosing non-rest areas. And here's another cool fact. If you end up driving in the dark because you're trying to get to this 24-hour rest stop, or you're trying to get to a certain campsite and you just can't make it, use your Google Earth. Hopefully you still have the map and you still got reception, because the map is in daytime. Get your passenger to look up ahead, and sure enough, you'll definitely find a spot to pull in, rest up. That's the best way to find camp. Trust me, in darkness we find camp. But what about stopovers on your trip? The campsites and all those days that you choose to take going across a trip. For example, the Savannah Way from Broome to Cairns. That is a big, long stretch. Let's say you plan to do that in 12 days. That's probably a bit of a push if you want to see a lot of things. But what if something went wrong? Here's my method. You get your calendar, you work out how many days you want to spend on the track, and then for each week you have on your calendar, on your trip, you add an extra day. 2 weeks, add 2 days. 3 weeks, add 3 days. Why? Just in case something unforeseen, bad things happen, but there's also good things. You get to this really beautiful campsite and you just want to spend more time there. Well, guess what? With your spare day, use it up there. It doesn't have to be just for the bad stuff. Extra day per week. Trust me, it's worth it. Knowing exactly when the roadhouses open and close is absolute paramount. The amount of times we've been caught up somewhere and we didn't get there just in time. But we could make it to the next one because we have extended fuel range. If you don't have extended fuel range, you're going to be that guy that's going to be camping at the roadhouse or the Bowser until it opens in the morning. Oh no! Carefully plan your fuel stops. It's very vital because you could lose a day, or at least half a day. How many litres per 100 kilometres do you burn? If you work that out, you've got your fuel range, right? Wrong. There are many factors that will burn more fuel than you can imagine. The obvious one first, headwinds, particularly when you're crossing the Nullarbor through the guts of Australia. When the wind is up, you could honestly burn up to 3 to 4 litres extra per 100 from personal experience. It's pretty hectic. Being in four-wheel drive will also add to the burning of fuel, but it's not as bad as some might say. Generally around 1 to 1.5 litres extra per 100. So if you're burning 16 litres per 100, probably more like 17.5 litres per 100. But this all changes when you go heavy four-wheel driving, low range four-wheel driving. It's very unpredictable and it's very hard to calculate. So how do we work this one out? Well, first of all, heavy four-wheel driving, what exactly is that? It's going up and down loose hills, going through soft sand in low range, always low range we're talking about. Anything that loads up the four-wheel drive is going to incur huge amounts of extra fuel burning. So for my vehicles in general, I work on 20 litres per 100. If I'm crossing a desert and only half the trip is desert from the fuel range, I'm just going to calculate the whole trip 20 litres per 100 because it can fluctuate sometimes. You might get bogged as well. It adds a huge amount to the burning of your fuel. Wrong tyre pressure can also incur extra burning of fuel, and anything else that makes your four-wheel drive really load up just to keep it moving. It's going to burn a lot more fuel. One mistake I find people do when calculating fuel, they'll go for a day trip, calculate the fuel, come back, they're not actually loaded up for a proper trip. They're not loaded right up to GVM before they go. You're going to burn more fuel with more weight. So you got your budget, you got your fuel range, you got a convoy now. In the convoy, there's one car out of 10 that has a 60 litre tank or perhaps an 80 litre tank. Everyone else has got big tanks.
Seem to be filling up a lot. It's a regular occurrence with this thing.
He needs to stop at every fuel station. So it's the one mod he needs to sort out in his vehicle is a fuel tank. Because he's got 350k range. Every single time that person needs to stop, everyone else has got to stop. That is the convoy range now, the weakest link. Keep that in mind. Look, the only benefit you'll have from carrying 200 litres as opposed to 80 litres is the fact that you can get fuel cheaper and go further, where old mate with the 80 litres is going to have to top up everywhere and pay the extra cost. But what if you're on a trip where there's a range where there is no fuel for 800 k's off-road? That's when things become tricky. Having said that, there is a way to assist the entire convoy by helping out those people with shorter range fuel tanks. You can help them by carrying extra jerry cans. Now I understand you're carrying something for someone else, but there is no I in team, and teamwork will go a long way to help the entire convoy. Not everyone can afford to install a long range tank or maybe even have the means to get one on their vehicle. If you want your mates to come along, you're gonna have to pitch in and help them out. Or you can leave them behind. Just make sure that old mate with the 8 litre tank pays for that fuel. And fuel prices out of a jerry can in the middle of nowhere are up there. I think they're about $6 a litre last I heard. Permits, border crossings, insurance, requirements, medical centres, runways, police. Those are all the official things you need to think of. Many people skip all these and get away with it, but if you get caught out, either the consequence is dire or the fine is huge. So if you don't have your permit, you can risk a $2,000 fine, but we have permits, so that's good. So don't get caught out, don't skip this part, let's get into it. Permits are actually super easy to obtain despite what you may think. I mean, it's a bit of paperwork, but it's not that bad. And some regions like the Dahl Highway requires 4 different permits. 3 for indigenous lands and 1 for a military zone. In other regions you have mines and things like that, so you need like permits and you need permissions to get through certain areas, otherwise you may rock up there and you get turned around. In fact, the information on a permit is very useful for your travels. Do you need to be on a certain UHF channel in case someone comes over a sand dune like the Simpson Desert? Do you need to have a sand flag? It'll also recommend what time of the day to be driving and recommend where you can camp. In some areas it'll even tell you that you can camp within 30 meters of the track because they understand you are super remote, things are going to happen, you're not going to get to where you always need to. How do you know if your trip requires a permit? You don't even have to Google search that, people. You just get a decent map and it says all over the map, permit required or private road, and it even has quarantine borders. A lot of information are on these maps. If you're not allowed to be there, you are not insured. Speaking of insurance, check what your insurance actually covers you for. Tell them before you go. That's the best thing to do, especially on a big trip. It's not so much of a deal going from Perth to Broome because that's just your general insurance, but when you're going Ambler Highway, which we're using as an example, you need to tell your insurance that's where you're going, this is the date you're starting at, this is the date you're coming out. In regards to medical emergencies, runways and medical centers, it's vital to know where they are from the start of your journey all the way through the journey to the end, because that is going to be a moving target. It's going to change where this assistance can come from should you need it. So how do you know where runways are and medical centers? Well, medical centers are clearly marked on the map and Google searches will find them as well. But the runways, you can't really Google search where the runways are. That's what the map is for. All these little plane icons, that's a runway. Stations have runways. A lot of places have runways where the Royal Flying Doctor could possibly land. It also depends on the condition of the runway. And that's where something like this comes in handy. Even if they can't get to you and you have a very bad situation, they actually have medical caches. Is it cache or cache? Medical cache. They got medical cache dotted all around Australia. So if you are near one, they can direct you to it, talk you through which drugs or which antibiotics you may need for the patient.
Should be right, mate.
Border crossings can be quite a surprise to a lot of travellers, especially entering WA. You got to surrender all your fruit, all your veg, and the speed limit changes if you're towing. You can only tow at 100 kilometers per hour when you enter WA. Whereas everywhere else, I'm pretty sure it's 110. I live in WA, I didn't make the rule, so don't have a go at me. Trip expectations. You've done all your planning, you've worked out your locations, you've picked many of them, and everyone does. It's always good to pick many locations because they're like that, the backup plan. You always need a backup plan if things don't go right. There's always somewhere else to go. Don't expect to see every single place you have planned out, and you should never do that. It doesn't matter how small a trip it is or how big a trip it is. You're not going to see every single location. You're better off spending more time at some locations rather than try and cover everything, because you are just going to not really experience everything the way you would have wanted to. Food plan, and I am getting hungry, and I bet you're getting hungry now because I'm talking about food. If you can make meals with just 3 or 4 ingredients, it's going to make your life so much easier. Look, don't go down the road of going on a 3-week trip and just having bread and sausages all the time. It gets a bit boring after a while. Have at least 3 ingredients, easy meals to make, pre-cooked meals even. You can freeze those, pull them out, or even use your travel buddy. Cook a nice, long, slow meal along the way. I wouldn't bring a camp oven just to cook one thing on a trip because you're taking up real estate in your storage. If you are going to use a camp oven, make sure you use it more than just a couple of days. Otherwise, you're just loading unnecessary weight in. The other thing I'd also suggest is if you're in a convoy, regardless if it's a 2-car, 3-car, 4-car, 5-car, take turns in cooking. So you can help each other out, but the main chef is a different person every 5th night. On a 10-day trip, you're only cooking 2 nights a week, but you are helping cleaning up and stuff. If someone doesn't want to be part of that group and they're trying to get into that group, leave them out. They can cook their own because otherwise they're freeloading. You don't want to freeload it on a trip. It just creates bad vibes. Trust me. Another thing I like to add, have some spare food. I wouldn't call it emergency food. It's just that food if you miss the roadhouse on time. You didn't get that roadhouse meal you were looking for. The pub's closed on a freaking Monday, which happens to me all the freaking time. Yeah, a bit bitter about that one. Have some canned food, have some crappy canned soup or whatever, and a bag of noodles. Get you by, right? It's just one night. Eating lots of food, smashing back a lot of tins or bottles creates huge amounts of rubbish. Sometimes when you're out camping, it feels like you're taking more stuff back than what you actually brought in, but there could be another reasons for that. And those reasons could be you haven't followed the tips I'm about to give you, or your mate is using your bin bag, which I'm guilty of sometimes, especially you, Chris, sorry about that. Or you're an absolute legend because you're cleaning up after other people's
Human throwaways are weird.
Good on ya. My favorite tip, collect burnables in one bag or one region of your wheelie bin bag if you have one of those. Use those to light campfires with, and you can essentially burn your paper rubbish. If there are any greenies out there getting their knickers into a bit of a twist here about me burning my paper rubbish, just calm down a little bit and hear me out. I would rather have my paper rubbish burnt at camp than falling out at camp out of my overflowing wheelie bin bag or on the highway or at landfill. Rather burn it. With plastic meat bags, for example, keep an extra snap lock bag, put all of those meat bags into that, compress all the air out of it, zip it up, put it in the fridge. Because if you put it in the fridge, it's not gonna stink out everything. Because if you do that on a 2-week or a 3-week trip, yeah, you're gonna experience roadkill smells coming from the back of your bin bag. Not cool. Avoid glass like the plague. Choose cans, because cans you can squash down, and if you do drop one, they shouldn't shatter. Nothing worse than having shattered glass around camp or inside your car even, or inside your fridge. I've cut my fingers on shattered glass in my esky once before. Avoid glass as much as you can. Of course, if you love wine, you can't get away from it most of the time. Have a few bottles, but don't bring cartons of beer bottles. And if your choice of beverage only comes in a glass bottle, it's probably pretty crap. Still not convinced about paper maps and you struggle to read paper maps, I would recommend bringing just a cheap compass with you. But if you're like me or many other people, you'll put your map on the bonnet. Don't use your compass on the bonnet. The metal is going to cause magnetic interference, just so you know. So is it paper maps or is it the GPS? What is the best option? To be honest, the best option is having both, and I do recommend that as well. In a convoy, you only really need to have a few people with a GPS, just in case another one fails. But paper map, only really the leader of the convoy needs that. It's the leader's responsibility for all navigation, but everyone else should have their input on the trip planning before they go. Once they're out there, it's all up to the convoy leader. And speaking of convoy leaders, let's talk about that right now. Trip planning and big convoys. Too many chefs spoil the broth. I'm not saying exclude everyone else from planning a trip and there's just one person planning the whole convoy. Get everyone's input in there. There needs to be a clear indication who is the convoy leader, and the convoy leader also needs to delegate certain roles to certain people. Make sure that everyone's sharing the spares. It's kind of like a big meeting, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the convoy leader. He's kind of responsible for those things. So if you're taking on the role of a convoy leader, be aware you have responsibilities. I would also suggest planning who's going to be Tail and Charlie. That way, when you're out there on a trip, you can at least make sure that everyone in the convoy between the leader and Tail and Charlie have made the correct turns, have gone the correct way, and there's good communication between the whole convoy. The bigger the convoy, you may need someone in the middle who is a delegated communications person as well, so he can relay to the back, because sometimes there is so much dust and distance between everyone, it's pretty easy to take a wrong turn or get lost. Because at the end of the day, it's the convoy leader's responsibility to get from point A to point B. As a convoy leader during the planning phase, you also need to ensure that every single vehicle that's coming on this trip is actually capable of doing the track, is actually capable of making the distance, like we spoke about earlier with the fuel range. Convoy leaders can be made look like fools very quickly if they haven't researched the road conditions. What if you end up at a flooded river crossing that you can't get across? Now you've got to tell your whole convoy, you got to go around it. I might have done that once before. You drive along the highway, you don't have the same fuel range as someone else, so you need to pull up for a bit of fuel. All right, you're now holding the convoy up. Now you're filling up, someone decides they need to go to the toilet after you finish filling up. Now you gotta wait for this person. Someone wants an ice cream. Oh, I want an ice cream too. Piles up, and then as you're driving along throughout the day, trust me, because this happens, you're going to be delayed. Maybe by an hour, you'll be surprised. If you need to travel in a convoy from the beginning to the start of your journey, then just don't expect to get as far as what you might think. Points to take from this: plan the entire trip day to day. Don't overestimate how far you can get, especially with a convoy. Allow for spare days, just in case the very good of finding a great camp or the bad of being held up. And of course, get some In Darkness We Find Camp merch to help you find your camp in the dark. Life and trouble saver. Here's a list I've talked about many times before, but it's got to be in this trip planning video. Sat phone. Main purpose: I need a bit of help because I've got this problem with my vehicle. This is where I am. I can send someone to here to get XYZ parts for my vehicle. I'm out of fuel, etc., etc. Where would you need one of these? Only really if it's really remote travel. How much did I pay for this? About 800 bucks outright for the phone, and it's about $30 for a plan. For me, it makes sense. It's cheap insurance because I travel a lot. For anyone else who can't justify it, just hire one. The PLB, Personal Locator Beacon, also known as an EPIRB. I need help right now. I don't care about anything else. It's a life or death situation. That's where this is different than a satellite phone. Retails for about 350 bucks. Is 350 bucks worth spending for your life? That's what you need to ask yourself. First aid kit. Every single vehicle must have one. Fire extinguisher. Every single vehicle must have one. Snake bite kit. But the thing is, you gotta know how to use this. And to learn how to use this, it's simply just a first aid course. It's standard practice now to learn how to treat snake bites. 1 in every 3 vehicles must have one of these if you're traveling in Australia. And it doesn't matter where you are in Australia, there are snakes absolutely everywhere. If you're scared of snakes, stay home. Backup plans. Every single trip ever made or planned needs to have a backup plan. Trust me. There's been so many times we've gone somewhere and we can't access because the gates are closed for whatever reason. There's a fire, there's a flood. We always have a backup plan. There's that other place in case we can't finish whatever trip we were planning to do. There's always somewhere else to go, if you planned it. If you gotta work on your feet, it makes it difficult. Imagine having a 12-car convoy and everyone's on their mobile phone suggesting, oh, we should go here, we should go there. You're gonna have too many chefs in the kitchen spoiling the broth. You've got your destination days planned out, your fuel worked out, all the necessary trouble and lifesavers worked out. Now it's time to prepare your vehicle before you go. You never ever set sail on a big trip, well, drive on a big trip, without having a proper service at least 2 weeks before you head off, especially if you're in a convoy. If your car breaks down simply because you didn't service your vehicle, could potentially then spot something, you're holding everyone else up, you're ruining everyone else's travel plans. So make sure, especially if you're planning the trip and you're inviting people on it, make sure that everyone just services the vehicle. Look, from Perth to Broome, no problem. Just leave them at the nearest roadhouse and off you go on your merry way. They can sort their own shit. But out in the middle of nowhere, it's kind of your responsibility. You can't leave someone behind. The same goes with any major changes to your vehicle. Try not to do them within 2 weeks before you leave. I'm the biggest culprit for this problem. Do what I say rather than do what I do, because I do this all the time. And it does catch you out. What spares you need to bring and what tools you need to bring. If you're on a convoy, you can split those things out between all of you. To know exactly what you need, there's a full video on spares right here, and there's another full video on 15 top tools that I recommend that you must have. So check those out. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and all that other stuff. It's for free.